Awkward situations are a hallmark of my life, but Amanda's wedding? That was on another level entirely. Let's just say that by the end of it, I was rethinking every life choice that had led me to that point. Amanda and I had been best friends since middle school. She was the effortlessly charming one, while I was the introverted klutz perpetually getting tangled in my own shoelaces. Despite our differences, we stuck together through everything: bad haircuts, failed school projects, and our ill-fated attempt at baking a wedding cake for her sister's bridal shower. Spoiler, it collapsed. When Amanda announced her engagement to Mike, I was thrilled. He was a great guy, and Amanda deserved all the happiness in the world. So, when she asked me to be her maid of honor, I couldn't have said yes faster. It wasn't until Amanda casually said, "And of course, you'll have a +1, that my enthusiasm hit a speed bump. A +1? Sure, in theory, it sounded great. But in practice? I'd been single for what felt like forever, and the idea of suddenly producing a date out of thin air was daunting. No problem, I chirped, immediately regretting it. And thus began my descent into what I now call the +1 chronicles. First, I turned to dating apps. I spent hours swiping, messaging, and going on some of the worst dates of my life. There was the guy who argued with the waiter over a 25-cent upcharge, the one who forgot his wallet, and the self-proclaimed influencer who tried to sell me protein powder. Next, I asked friends for help. I don't care who it is, I begged. As long as he has a pulse and can fake being my boyfriend for a weekend. Their suggestions were underwhelming. One friend set me up with her cousin, who spent the entire date describing his rock collection in excruciating detail. Another introduced me to her coworker, who greeted me by announcing, "I don't believe in marriage." With the wedding rapidly approaching, I was out of options. That's when my cousin Jake made a suggestion so outrageous, I laughed it off at first. "Just make someone up," he said, shrugging. "Say he got sick at the last minute. No one will know." It was a ridiculous idea, but desperation has a way of making ridiculous ideas seem reasonable. And that's how Andrew came to be. Andrew was the ultimate dream date. I gave him a solid backstory. He was a software engineer with a passion for hiking and a quirky sense of humor. I even found a photo of a ridiculously attractive man on a stock photo site to use as proof if anyone asked. The plan was simple: I'd talk him up, then at the last minute, claim he couldn't make it. Easy, right? The wedding weekend arrived, and I was ready. At the rehearsal dinner, I felt confident, until Amanda greeted me with a knowing smile and said, "I just met Andrew. He's so great." My stomach dropped. "You met him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah. He's here already," Amanda said cheerfully. "He wanted to surprise you. He's over there talking to Mike." I turned, and there he was. Tall, dark-haired, and wearing a suit that screamed sophistication. The man I'd fabricated out of thin air was standing across the room, laughing with the groom. Who the hell was this guy? I stared at him, my mind racing. How was this possible? Was this some kind of cosmic joke? Before I could fully process what was happening, Amanda pulled me into another conversation, leaving me no time to escape or confront the mysterious stranger. Eventually, I worked up the courage to approach him. As I walked over, he turned and smiled warmly. "Lily, right?" he said, extending a hand. "I'm Andrew." I froze. He knew my name. Of course, he knew my name. Amanda must have told him. I shook his hand, trying to keep my cool. Yeah. That's me." "And you're Andrew?" "That's me," he said, grinning. "Amanda's told me so much about you." "Has she now?" I asked, my voice strained. He chuckled. "She mentioned you might be surprised to see me." Guess she was right. I managed a weak laugh, my mind racing. Who was this guy, and why was he acting like my date? Andrew, or whoever this man really was, seemed completely at ease, which only made my internal chaos worse. We ended up standing together at the buffet table, and I desperately tried to piece together what was happening without letting my panic show. "So," he asked, breaking the silence, "are you going to tell me why you look like you've seen a ghost? Or should I just keep guessing?" His question caught me off guard, and for a split second, I considered coming clean. But before I could say anything, Amanda reappeared, glowing with excitement. "Lily. I knew you two would hit it off," she said, grinning. "Isn't Andrew great?" Yeah," I stammered, feeling like I was caught in some bizarre dream. "He's fantastic." Amanda beamed. "I knew it. Don't let him get away, okay? He's a keeper." Then, with a conspiratorial wink, she left us alone again. I turned back to Andrew, who was now watching me with amused curiosity. "So," he said, "what's the plan for the weekend? Do I just follow your lead?" "Follow my lead?" I repeated, my brain struggling to process the question. "Well, yeah," he said, smiling. "I'm your date, right? I figured you'd have some kind of game plan." If I'd been panicking before, now I was on the verge of full-blown hysteria. "Oh, right. The plan. Totally. I have one," I lied, even as my mind scrambled for a way out of this mess. The rest of the evening was a blur. Andrew, or whatever his real name was, seemed perfectly content to play the part of my date, chatting with guests and even stepping in to help Amanda's mom carry a particularly heavy centerpiece. Meanwhile, I was mentally drafting an apology speech for Amanda, Mike, and everyone else who was about to find out that I'd fabricated an entire boyfriend. But as the evening went on, something strange happened. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, I found myself relaxing around Andrew. He was funny, charming, and surprisingly good at deflecting nosy relatives' questions about our relationship. By the time the rehearsal dinner ended, I almost forgot that I had no idea who he really was. Almost. As we walked out of the venue together, I knew I couldn't put off the inevitable any longer. I turned to him, my heart pounding. "Okay," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." He raised an eyebrow, his expression curious. "Sure. What's up?" I took a deep breath. Who are you? And why are you here?" His reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of looking confused or offended, he laughed. "You don't know? I thought Amanda would have told you." "Told me what?" I asked, my voice tinged with both frustration and embarrassment. "I'm Daniel," he said, offering a sheepish smile. "Mike's friend. He asked me to come as your date." I blinked, completely thrown off. "Wait. Mike asked you to be my date?" Daniel nodded. "Apparently, Amanda was worried you'd feel out of place without a +1, so Mike recruited me. I figured it was no big deal, just a favor for a friend. But, I'm starting to think there's more to this story than I realized." I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. On one hand, I was relieved that Daniel wasn't some kind of weird manifestation of my lie. On the other hand, the realization that Mike and Amanda had orchestrated this without telling me was a lot to process. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You're not actually named Andrew, and you're not here because of me?" Daniel winced. "Technically, no. But for what it's worth, you seem pretty great so far." I let out a laugh, partly from relief, partly because the whole situation was so absurd. "Well," I said, "this is definitely not how I imagined this weekend going." "Hey," he said, flashing a grin. "It's not every day I get to be someone's imaginary boyfriend." The next day, I braced myself for the wedding, determined to survive without making things even more awkward. To my surprise, Daniel turned out to be an excellent wingman. He played along with the Andrew story when necessary, charmed Amanda's extended family, and even joined me on the dance floor during the reception. At one point, as we were standing off to the side watching the newlyweds share their first dance, he turned to me and said, "You know, for a fake date, this has been a pretty good time." I laughed, finally able to appreciate the humor in the situation. "You're not half bad yourself, for a guy who got roped into this at the last minute." By the end of the night, something unexpected happened. I actually started to enjoy Daniel's company. He was funny, kind, and way more understanding about the whole imaginary boyfriend debacle than I deserved. As we said our goodbyes, he hesitated for a moment before asking, "So, does this mean I'm out of a job, or do you think we could try this for real?" I felt a blush creep up my cheeks as I smiled. "I think we could give it a shot." And just like that, what started as a complete disaster turned into something I never could have anticipated, the beginning of a real relationship. Sometimes, life is stranger than fiction. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe and turn on notifications to be the first to have radish and real stories with you. Have a great day.